Hello everybody, this is Craig from the Whitmix Corporation. I'm going to be your presenter this morning on this particular topic. Just a couple of things before we start. At the end of this broadcast, you will, if you have registered for it, you will be sent an email on how to acquire your CDT or Florida CE broker credits that are necessary. You'll receive 1 hour of scientific for this particular webinar. If you have any questions, you can certainly type them in. I'll try and manage the box here. If not, you can always reach me later at cpickett@whitmix.com, and I'd be happy to answer the questions for you. Just by way of introduction, I am the Technical Education Manager here at the Whitmix Corporation. I'm a 35-year CDT. Been in the business about 42 years, and previously owned a dental laboratory. I've worked both in the laboratories as a manager and as an owner, and then also in industry for several large manufacturing firms and companies that you're well familiar with over the years. Now we do this. This is a great job. Let's talk this morning, if we can, about digital print technology and how it affects today's technician. We've just concluded the fourth of many programs that are going to go on across the United States and Canada and other areas of the world, but four big ones that have taken place here recently, starting with the midwinter meetings in Chicago and LMT Lab Day there, the Florida meeting just concluded, LMT West just concluded, and up in Canada we had Technorama, which was here a few weeks back, and most certainly the topic that was most looked at was print technology, and what's it going to do and how are we going to deal with print technology. So this is kind of an overarching view of it. But I think it's important for every technician to know where the industry is headed with this material and what we're doing, and then make your choices accordingly. So here we go. We are going to see if I can get it all to work here. Ask this question. Is it that important? And the answer, of course, is yes. It's always terribly important to know what the latest technology is. I know sometimes as dental technicians, we have a tendency to bury our heads at the desk, and that's not, or at the bench. That's really not the best way to do things. We need to be aware of what's going on. I hear technicians say all the time, well, my doctors aren't interested in. And the reality is that they probably will be, and you won't know it. And so it's important that you hop on board here and understand just what's going on in this technology. So let's take a look. LMT Magazine printed some really great information here 2 or 3 months ago. Maribeth was the particular author on this stuff. It was called Small Labs Catching Up with the Digital Revolution. If you got it, thumb back through and find it. It's just a great article, and we're going to borrow some of her information here. Okay, first of all, let's take a look at what's happening with digital restorations just in general. In 2015, you can see we had laboratories, and these are 1 to 5 person labs, so kind of the average little laboratory out there, doing 56%, and 2 years later we had 80% of the dental laboratories involved in some kind of digital restoration. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing all the work themselves. This might be outsourcing to someone who's digital completely, or it might be that they purchased in a scanner and they're doing the scanning and design work and then outsourcing the manufacturing. Whatever it is, they're involved doing digital restorations. If we take a look at what's happened in the milled crown and bridge workload that we're familiar with, because milling came on certainly before print technology did. Take a look at 2005, we had about 4% involved, and 2017 about 61% of the load that's out there is being milled, the Crown and Bridge workload. That's a big difference, and I think we've seen that for the most part in all of our dental laboratories. It's certainly affected products that are on the market, and how much of that product is being A, manufactured, and B, sold to our industry. It's made a big change. We've seen new products and materials come on board with the advent of this milling, like zirconia, for example. Now, if we take a look here at the digital equipment purchases just in this last year, now the past year being 2017, and we want to look at the second column over that just talks about one scanner. In 1 to 5 person laboratories, 19% purchased digital equipment. And then it goes up from there, 36%, 27%. That was just the scanners. Milling machines, you can see 8%, 23, 27. Standalones, a few more. And then it talks about 3D printers. 9% of 1 to 5 person labs in this last year bought a printer. And 15% of 6 to 10 person labs, and then 10 and up, 26% got involved. So you can see that there's more and more and more of this digital equipment that's being purchased as we push into this new technology. Now, if we take a look at digital equipment that's currently in dental laboratories, and once again, let's go to the second column from the left, you'll see that there are 50% approximately that have at least one scanner. And in many cases goes up from there. More than 2 scanners in a 10-person lab, 62% of 10-person laboratories have at least 2, if not more, scanners already involved. When it talks about mills, they're talking about anywhere from 23 to 30% of laboratories that have those mills, at least one, if not more. The same thing in standalones. And then if we look at 3D printers, 1 to 5 person laboratories, you'll see there's 14% that already have a 3D printer involved. And you have in the 10-person labs, if you go all the way over to the right-hand column, more than 2 3D printers, 19%, which is a pretty large percentage when you think about it. So we are, as a industry, embracing this technology. And the question is, for everybody, where are we going with it and what are they doing? Now, let's take a look at digital impressions for a moment. Now, we know that actually a very small percentage of doctors are actually doing digital impressions, about 15% according to LMT, which is a very small number in comparison. We've got about that same number of doctors that have embraced digital technology, and yet we have over 50% of dental laboratories that have. So the labs are actually leading in this particular instance. Now, there's a lot to be said about what's causing that. Why aren't more and more clinical settings using this material? And I think there's several factors that are involved there. First one's been a kind of a rocky financial road. So you have dentists that at the age of 60 and 65 that haven't retired when a generation ago they would have. And so those practices are not for sale. They also are looking at a possibility of maybe 5 more years that they'll hang on. And the question is, do they want to invest in this kind of technology before they sell? It also means that since they're holding on to their practices, that the younger dentists that are getting out of school are not in a position to purchase those practices. We have more and more of those younger dentists that are doing corporate dentistry instead. And part of that reason is because of the availability of practices for sale, and also because of the debt load. that young dentists are coming out in. But it's these younger dentists that really are interested in this digital technology because they've grown up with it. They've grown up with computers, and they're very familiar with them. And a lot of the older dentists had to kind of learn on the job, if you would, with them. So let's take a look at what digital impressions have done and what people are saying. 54% of the respondents are saying that basically their remakes have remained the same since they began accepting digital impressions, which is probably about right. Now, 38% have said that their remakes have decreased, which means that the doctor is better at taking the digital impression than they are with the regular impression. That includes capturing margins, getting everything clear, no pulls, no, all the things that we're used to seeing that would create problems with an impression. 8% say that remakes have increased. And you might kind of step back with that and say, why is that? But when you think about it, it's new technology, so there's a learning curve. That's really the best way to say it. There's just a learning curve. And I think these numbers will change if we revisit them in the next 2 to 5 years. Now, if we look at milling, because that's been there a little longer than the printing technology, and the effect on external remakes, 72% say that they've remained the same since they began offering milled restorations, and that really means zirconia, that the remakes on zirconia have remained about the same as they were with PFMs. 23% though say that they've decreased, which is quite an interesting piece. Nearly a fourth of all units. 5% say that remakes have increased. So once again, the learning curve that's in there. And I think we'll see changes as this technology, once again, is more readily accepted. Okay, so a little bit of digital model production. There's always the question of, how are we going to make models? Are we going to keep pouring gypsum? What's going to happen there? So let's take a look. 1/3 of labs that offer digital CMB restorations print models instead of pouring them. So when we take a look at that, the dark bars are 2015 and the blue is 2017. You'll see that print models in-house have increased since 2015. They've gone to 42% of the respondents. The number of laboratories that have them printed by a manufacturer, that's the center bars, you'll notice that's increased a little bit too. But let's go back again to the left to see the dramatic increase in those models printed in-house. And that would reflect, of course, the numbers of laboratories that have printers in-house. And then outsourcing printing to another laboratory, you'll notice that that has decreased. And that's simply because the technology is moving from the outsourced laboratory or the outsourced to manufacturer back in-house. They're taking control of their own models. All right, so let's if we can read this just a little bit. I thought this was a good quote from Ryan McKee. He's out in Billings, Montana. He's currently the average percentage of crown and bridge fabricated using the 3D printer is only 14%, but with a wider variety of materials and more affordable systems, that number is expected to increase quickly. Now here's his quote: by the end of the next decade, 3D printing will have a bigger impact than milling has had thus far on our industry. And I think he's right. You're going to see that, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go along and why that's important. Okay, so what are we currently printing? And that means right now what's available to us. First thing is models. There have been several types of models that have been printed over the last few years, but I think we're kind of locking in on a nice resin model, and that's clear and that has removable dies that are also printed along with it. These models are accurate as long as they're printed on a good machine, and they're very clean and acceptable to work on. The colors that are available are good for almost everything that we're doing, and they're a great source. Now, especially remember, for those that are accepting intraoral scans, you don't have any other option but to have them printed. So models are a big deal, and most of the labs that are purchasing printers right now, models is the #1 thing they're doing with with their printers. Okay, casting or pressing patterns. A lot of folks are designing in, for example, 3-shape, and then they are printing these parts, copings, ponics, for either cast technology, which is still out there, full contour crowns, or they're pressing in any of the materials that are available out there now for pressing. There are differences between this printed material for pressing or casting and model materials. So you need to take a look at that as you're getting involved. We're doing surgical guides. This would be the number 2 thing that's happening with printers right now. Surgical guides. They're easy to design and easy to print, and they work very well. Okay, night guards and splints are becoming available. And we're going to talk a little bit about materials here just a little bit later, but night guards and splints. Custom trays, which is an interesting kind of a thing. We don't hear a lot about printed custom trays, but that's certainly an available technology in printing. Partial frame patterns are becoming popular this way. They're printed like this and then cast like they would, like you would a crown and bridge casting, as opposed to using a refractory model and then surrounding the whole model. You're simply printing a pattern and casting a pattern. It's kind of an interesting way of looking at doing this technology. You can actually get 2 and 3 of these patterns in each ring, which makes it much more efficient than it has been in the past. Dentures. Dentures are beginning to be printed. There's some combinations that are out there. Dentsply has acquired Avident. They're partners now. Now that's more of a milling procedure. But you have KULZER, who is also providing a denture, which is kind of a hybrid that uses printed parts and then milled parts or pressed parts. But this technology is coming along. Certainly the design technology is there. What most folks are working on now are the resins involved and getting them past the FDA. Teeth are interesting because right now, if you're going to print teeth, they're going to be monochromatic. So many that are looking at this are looking at printing the denture base and then just cementing existing denture teeth. But the technology is headed towards the possibility of printing everything. Printers will be a little different. They're going to have to be able to print in color and various colors, and so that end of the hardware is going to have to change a little bit by the time we get to really full out printing dentures. And I would suspect that we would print the entire denture 100%, including the teeth, which would come from a design library. But we'd need to be able to print all the internals, incisals, cervical colors, all those things too. Okay, now aligners. This is technology that's been around for a while, but most of the aligners have been done on a model and done with a suck down. But you are able now in the industry to print the various models you need in repositioning and then do a suck down to manufacture the aligner itself. The resin material right now for aligners is being worked on. There's some thickness kinds of issues that are being done in print. The thinness and the rigidity that we get from the suck down material is a little better right now than we get from printed materials. Printed materials that thin are a little fragile and tendency to fracture. So chemists are working on that, companies are working on that, but I think that you're going to see those aligner materials available. It's going to be a little bit of time because once their composition is created, they still have to get through the FDA, and that's a process for manufacturers to do. But it's coming. It's coming. Okay, so how does all of this affect you? And it affects you in a positive way, not negative. And you've got to take a look at this as a positive thing that's happening within our industry, something that's allowing you to be more efficient with your time. And that is, in our day and age, the only way that you're going to be able to compete is to remain as efficient as you possibly can be. Okay, so Mark Williamson is a great removable guy. Mark was the Panthera International Award winner this past year. And this was his comment. He did two cases, one that he fabricated a traditional wax denture, one that he did digitally. And this was his quote. He said, "I pride myself on the skills I've acquired during my 36 years as a denture technician, but the digital denture blew everything away." I think, you know, I've seen some of Mark's work, and it is fantastic. I will tell you that I think where he's going is that he's surprised that the mechanics of the machine are getting this good. And they are. You're going to see better and better and better results from machinery. And once you do, then your capability of producing more, producing on the mass, is going to be better. Will that bring the cost of things down? Certainly, it always does. However, at that point, you need to look at if my sellable good is selling for less, then I just need to make it up in volume. And that means you're going to have to go out and sell some more. Go out and sell some more. Okay, so is digital replacing analog? Well, yes and no, but not quite yes. Not clinically. It's coming along, but it is coming along slowly. You'll remember that I said we have about 15% of dentists that have embraced that at this point in time. And so a lot of them are still using impression materials. Once again, why get involved at the end of my practice by putting in all of this technology that's expensive when the old goop has worked fine for me? That's sort of what we're hearing out there, and the numbers bear that out. So I think once these doctors do retire, you're going to see more digital technology coming into the practices that are there. All right. Don Albensi is another one. Albensi Dental Labs, great laboratory, points out, he says here that they have people who design cases that don't necessarily have to be under the same roof as the laboratory. He has one technician who lives in Arizona. Okay, he's got another in New York. They're working from home. They design 50 to 60 units a day in addition to what the laboratory's 5 in-house designers are doing. So overall, they're looking at an additional 800 units a night. Okay, what we don't get to complete during the day, we have designed overnight using our anatomical library and preferences. The units are ready for printing or milling the next morning. What that means to you as a laboratory, and especially as a laboratory owner, is that I can use talent wherever that talent is. I don't have to incur the expense of bringing them physically to where I am, because now they can do the work and they can ship that work to me via the computer, and away we go. And that's a big deal. As an owner, you're often owner of a laboratory, you're often relegated to looking for technicians that are within your geographic area. Sometimes you've got to find somebody who can commute to where you are, and that limits you to an hour away generally. Otherwise, you're faced with relocation costs, which just add to the costs of the laboratory. In this case, Don is able to use people from their homes, wherever they live. You don't have to disrupt a family, and you still get great work. So it might be something for you to consider if you're a laboratory owner. But it also, as a dental technician, means that you're going to compete with other technicians who aren't in your geographic area. And so you should be aware of that. All right, so here is what always gets to us and has for several years now. Doctor calls up and says, I have a file for you, and you're not ready. Now, what that means is that you have to say to the doctor, I'm sorry, I can't help you, and you know where he's going with that case. He's going to go find that other laboratory. You've learned two things. First thing you learned is doctor has digital technology and I wasn't aware of it. And the second thing you learned is I'm not getting this case. Both of those things aren't good for business. And so you've got to be prepared one way or the other to accept that file, regardless of what that is. Now, what does that mean to you? It means you've got to say, you betcha, doctor, send it over, and then you can outsource it to someone who can do it. Or it means you bet, doctor, send it over, and you have the scanner design software so that you can design whatever you're doing and then outsource the manufacturing of it. Or it means that you have the entire system and can take care of it, or her. It's purely up to you how you get involved, but you are going to have to be prepared for this and be ready for that day when the doctor calls, and they will. Okay, so there's digital design. Now, I can tell you that there are several companies out there that are great. Whitmix sells 3Shape, and we believe that that's a really important part of today's dental laboratory technology. If you have any questions about that, you can certainly call up here. We've got technicians that are on staff here that are experts in this particular technology, and they'd be more than happy to answer general questions or specific questions for you. Okay, then you're going to have to make some choices about whether you have reductive or additive manufacturing. So reductive is simply the Michelangelo approach to something, right? Michelangelo said that when asked how he created an angel out of a block of marble, he said he just took away everything that didn't look like an angel. And that's reductive manufacturing, and that's what milling does. You take a puck of zirconia, you mill out what you want, you get rid of everything around it that isn't tooth-shaped, and then you have a tooth to progress with. Whitmix is a reseller of the Roland milling machines, which is now DG here in the United States, and we're happy to talk to you about those kinds of needs if you have questions about milling. There's several varieties of mills that are out there now. There's dry mills, there's wet mills, there's auto changing mills, disc changing mills. There's several. So sometimes that can be confusing. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about that. Now, additive manufacturing, that's printing. That's where you're taking a raw material and you're adding it together. Now, you've been doing additive manufacturing in the past. That's what waxing was all about. If you were dripping and dripping little bits of wax here and there to create what you wanted to create, then that was additive. If you were a squish bite person, you piled up a big pile of wax, squished in the opposing, and then cut everything away, well, that was reductive. But a lot of folks fell into the Peter K. Thomas approach, which was dripping the wax where it was supposed to be so that we didn't spend a lot of time carving stuff away. And you guys, you were doing additive manufacturing before printers came along. Okay, so how does additive manufacturing work? Let's talk about that for just a minute. There are different types that are out there, but the one that I think is preferential here in our industry right now is what we call a DLP technology, which is the direct light method. And if you'll follow me here, at the very bottom of your screen, you're going to see there's a light source that projects off a plate through a lens and then through a bath of photopolymer. That's that light yellow-brown bar in the center, and then projects itself up onto where here we're calling it a stage, but we call it a build plate. And by successively showing different slices of our pattern, then we can build that pattern in 3 dimensions by basically using a projector to project an image. And this is the faster of the technologies currently that are out there. You also have laser technology. Laser, instead of shooting just simply a photograph, a projected image, has to trace the image, and so it's just a little bit slower than the DLP technology that's available. What happens is that the stage or the build plate actually comes down and engages the photopolymer, and that's where that takes place. That projection then would take place, and then it lifts off there while the polymer settles, goes back down, shoots the next layer. That's DLP technology. It's fairly simple, works really well. All right, so here's how light cured resins work, and later on in the year we're going to have a little more in depth on this, but I wanted to give you just a little kind of a flavor. In light cured resins, the photons from light activate what's called an initiator, and it produces something called a free radical. Now, if you take a look at this, the free radicals in adjacent molecules link each other together. But what that basically means, a free radical is this unit here. You see all the little dots, and you'll notice that most of the red dots are paired. And then there's one that's called an unpaired electron, or you can see it at the top, that's spinning around out there. And electrons don't like to hang out singly like that. They like to hook up with other electrons. And so this would be a free radical. And then what happens is that the free radicals connect with each other so that they hook molecule to molecule to molecule. And what you do is you create this kind of a net on a microscopic level, but what we would see is a solid. And that's how it works, okay? So the light activates the free radicals, and they hook to each other and create a solid. In this case, the solid's created on the build plate. Okay? Accuracy is a big concern. A lot of talk about accuracy. So I think this is the easiest way to explain accuracy. There's two things that you have to look at. The first one is Z resolution. Now, if you'll notice these two cones, you can see that one of them has larger steps than the other one. Z resolution, or the up-down build of that particular object, has to do with two things: either the thickness of each of the layers, as you can see here, and the thicker the layer that you build, the more rough, for lack of a better term, the outside of this material is going to be. And you can see that based on the one that's on the left of your screen and the one that's on the right of your screen. So Z resolution is thickness that you print each layer in. Z is also the height that you can print in a given printer. Okay, some printers have very small height capabilities, some have quite large capabilities. This is our larger Asiga printer, and you can see that we can structure this and stack everything all together and build this very large, tall, massive thing. It takes a little bit of time. You're going to have to do it overnight, or it'll take all day, but there's a lot of units that are in there, whatever you can get to nest on a build plate. But those are the two things when we talk about Z height. So when someone's talking about accuracy and they're talking about Z, they're really just talking about layer thickness. What's the smallest layer that they can print? Where the real accuracy is in your XY resolution. And the very best way to explain this is that it's like pixels on your television. The more pixels you have, the tinier they are in any given screen, and the more clarity you have in your television picture. So if you look on the right, you can see that this XY resolution is a little bit large, and it leaves on the outside edges this grainy structure, which makes things look more rough and feel more rough. As we get a larger number in our XY resolution, you can see that things get smoother. So that's where your accuracy is going to be. When you go to look at printers, you want to ask what's your XY resolution capability and what's going on with Z. Okay, those are your two things. All right, now the next thing is build plate size. That's just how many or how large of an object can I put on there. And the various printers have various different build plate sizes. You're going to want to take a look at two things. First thing is, in this picture, you can see that the restorations have been stacked vertically, and you can get more restorations in on a given build plate when they're stacked vertically. But because the height is higher, or the Z is higher, it's also going to take longer to print. Now, if you were able to lay down that particular restoration horizontally, it would take much less time to print, but you could only get maybe half the number on that particular build plate when you nest. So you're going to have to decide what's the best build plate size for the kinds of restorations that you're printing. All right, so let's take a look at some of the competitors that are out there in the market right now. Now, certainly this isn't all of them, but it's a good representation of who's available out there. And the first one that's making a big splash is Formlabs. And the biggest reason why Formlabs is making a big splash is because it's fairly inexpensive compared to many of the other printers, even desktop printers that are on the market today. You should note that it is a 405 nanometer light. Now, we'll talk about that. They come in 2 different nanometer strengths, the printers do. 405 and 385. 385 is the one that has more resins available. You'll notice that the build plate sizes here, the XY resolution is 140 nanometers. The layer thickness, this is talking X and Y, where it really is layer thickness is in Z. You've got those options, okay, 25, 50, and 100. Those are your 3. It uses laser technology, and so it's a little bit slow in the print process. Not as suitable for crown and bridge applications. The accuracy just isn't there, but it's great for other kinds of things, and it is inexpensive, comparatively speaking. Okay, the Bego Varseo is out there. Once again, your XY resolution now is 50 microns. You get layer resolution, or Z, of 50 to 100 microns. It is DLP and uses a UV curing process. We didn't really talk about that. All DLP printers, once that pattern has been printed, needs to also go through a UV or a light curing process. If you're going to do clear materials, that is splints and things of that nature, then you need to use a printer that has UV capability. Now, we should talk too about closed and open systems. We've talked about this for a long time in many different things. A closed system requires you to use everything from that manufacturer. An open system allows you, of course, to use other manufacturers' materials within your particular machinery process. This, from Bego, is a closed system. And the materials are fairly expensive. The last we checked, I'm sure they're coming down, but the last that we checked, about $500 a liter for that material. Okay, Envisiontec's been out there for quite some time. You'll notice their XY resolution about 35 microns, Z 25 to 150, so you've got some decent capability there. It is DLP, but it is a closed material system, so you probably are going to pay a little bit more for those resins that are coming out of Envisiontec, but they are a good machine. Rapid Shape has been there for a while. Z, you've got 10, 25, 50, and 100 microns. XY, 60. So you don't have quite the accuracy capability in the XY resolution that you do with others that will allow you to change that XY. It is DLP. It is an open material system. DWS is out there. It's one of the newer ones. We're not sure what the Z resolution is. XY, they're reporting about, I'm sorry, we've got commas in there. 01 to 10 microns is where they're going. It is a closed material system also, and you do need to use their materials. Okay, KULZER just came out with the Cara Scan 4.0. I'm sure there's more information on it, but at the time that I put this together, I couldn't get specifics. And it's something probably to take a look at as you are going through your process. Carbon is the one that's got a lot of interest. You've seen a lot of things done with carbon printers, including printing soles of running shoes. The Carbon is a lease-only machine, so you do not own this machine. You lease it, and you'll have to take a look at your return on investment on the lease to see if Carbon makes sense for you. It is a fast machine. That's one thing about it. You have build volumes, a resolution of 75 microns. It is good for lots of different things. Carbon printers are being used outside of the dental industry for many things. We're hearing a lot of great stories and great outcomes with carbon machines. But you're going to have to take a look and see if leasing is the way to go for you. All right. Then we have the Asiga line. This is something that Whitmix sells here in the United States. They are an Australian product, and so far they have been working exceptionally well. As of this date, we have over 60 of them in the field here in the United States, and they're working beautifully. If we take a look at Asiga and we ask this question, why choose it? The first thing on top is that it's open material. That means that you can use anybody's third-party material that fits in here. Remember, I told you there were two different light sources, 405 nanometers and 385. So you've got to determine which material will fit in which machine. The Pro 2 includes a 5-year warranty on the light, has really low maintenance. There's ball screw linear drives on this thing, distortion-free optics. It's all glass. It's really easy to switch out materials, so you don't have to clean everything. You have to clean your build plate, but the material actually sits in a tray. The resin material does. You remove the tray, slide it away in a dark box, put in a new tray material, and away you go. So it's simple to do. The software called KULZER software that drives the nesting of this is included in the machine. It's easy to use, quick and easy to understand, and makes for a really nice switching application into this kind of technology. Okay, here's where we are with XY resolution. You can go anywhere from 37 to 75 microns. You can set that. Your Z is from 1 micron, which I would not recommend simply because it's going to take you 3 weeks to print anything, up to 150 microns if you want to print that thick. Your Z print height, depending upon machine, anywhere from 81 to 200 millimeters. And your build plate sizes range from 71 by 40 to 144 by 81. So you've got a variety of options there, something that you can tailor to fit what you're doing with your particular needs. Now, the KULZER software, we should tell you, is completely free. Comes with it. The upgrades are free. There's no extra added charges to it. You've got lifetime support. The support runs through Whitmix and our digital technicians that are here. It is Apple and Windows computer capable, so you've got a lot of access using this particular printer or this line of printers. Okay, now printers are only as good as the resins they print, so Whitmix does have a great line of resins. If you have an open source machine currently, you should take a look at what Whitmix has got going for resins. The question right now is, do you have a clear one for aligners? And remember, we talked about that, and it's not quite yet. Do you have one that can stay in the mouth for long term? And the answer is no. Nobody really has that yet. The FDA has approved some short-term materials, but not long-term yet. So there are several manufacturers working on that, including Whitmix. But we do have this variety for you if you're interested in those resins. Please give us a call. We'll tell you where we are and how up to date we are. Okay, so what are you looking for when you're looking at resins? You're looking at flexibility versus brittleness. You're looking at the matching nanometers of light, so 385 or 405 for your printer. The color that you prefer clarity in a clear material. Is it FDA in Health Canada or Europe approved? And you want easy post-processing. Now, right now, most post-processing has to do with two alcohol baths, a dirty one that gets most of the goop off, and then a clean one, and then a light cure at the very end. The light curing machine does also come with the printer with Asiga. Now, what's the future going to be with these materials, with printing? Where are we going to head, do you think? Let's talk about a couple of things. There's what's called Z3D Lab. It's a French company. They are working on a zirconia titanium powder that's a composite that's printable. There are full contour layer high strength ceramics. These are usually nanoparticle ceramics. They're working on printing final restorations and then coloring to match. Natural dentition, some of that coloring is going to be in our current print system is going to have to be strictly monolithic, but there are companies that are working right now on the ability to layer other materials onto this. So much like pressings, where you want to do a incisal that you stack later, you would be able to do that kind of thing. Just looking at it. Okay, now there are antimicrobial plastics that are out there. There's Dutch researchers that are working on that, which would be kind of interesting, wouldn't it, to be able to print something, put it in the mouth, and have it really battle the bacteria that causes tooth decay. It'd be wonderful. Wake Forest says they have a 3D printer that can create organs and tissue and bone for implantation. Which would be fabulous, wouldn't it? I mean, if you really crushed a bone, you knew you couldn't put it back as is, to be able to just print that segment out, slip it in, have it work in your body. What a great thing bioprinting is going to be able to do for us. I see a future. We have it now with milled materials that are permanent restorations. I see a future in nanoceramics. In resins as a composite material, but we'll see. We'll see what the various companies can come up with in our industry. If we truly get to that point, once again, you'd have crown in an hour without any trouble. Now, here we go. This is it. Like Enamic from Vita, but a liquid form, could be printed by a common 3D printer. Could be done in the clinical office, could be done at the lab. You could adjust it with light cure stains, but the key would be it's a material that could be permanently cemented. And I don't think we're too far away from these materials. Okay, so what might your laboratory look like in the future? Well, it might become just a design center when you think about it. If the doctor's capturing the information digitally, and the doctor could put a printer in his office that can print a permanent restoration, then the key piece involved in there is going to be the design of that restoration. Now that requires someone, hopefully, who has some background in functional occlusion, and not just grabbing something out of a library and snuggling it in someplace, but literally knowing what's going on there. So could this not be a workflow? The doctor takes a scan, emails that scan out to the lab, which is a design center, designs the crown in every aspect, ships it back to the printer in the doctor's office. It begins to print. A few minutes later, the dental assistant removes it, does the post-processing of the material, and cements it. It's a pretty easy workflow to envision. And I think we'll see more and more of that. You become design specialists whose business it is to know functional occlusion and know how to design functional occlusion into restorative materials. I think the world is going to change dramatically when we get to that point in time. Okay, so are you ready? Are you really ready? Have you thought about everything that you need to do? Are you thinking or considering printing or digital for that matter? Are you on board? Are you thinking about getting on board? Are you halfway in? Where are you in your process? And is this something that you're actually focusing on so that you are ahead of the curve and not playing catch up with the curve? Okay, I think this is hilarious. Someone sent this to me the other day, and I can't remember who it is, but we all know where our world is going. We've run into it already in the computers, but here we are. Sorry, your username and password don't match. There is a prevalence of computer and digital technology in our lives, and we need to embrace it, not run from it. We need to use it for our advantage, not let it control us. But we need to be aware of what's available for us out there and what we can do. All right, now, if you want to know a little bit more about this, Whipmix has a free download. You just go to the website, which is www.whipmix.com. You can get this free download, the Dental Technician's Guide to 3D Printing. Give you tons of information in there. You can pick it up at your leisure. And of course, there's these webinars. Surf through the webinars on the page. If you go to our homepage and then click webinars, there's plenty of webinars there for you to go through and do whatever you want to do. And I think we're there. So we appreciate you spending time with us. There is one question up there that's on the screen right now, and that is, can Asiga models and dies be used for crown and bridge? And the answer is absolutely. You can wax on them if you feel like waxing on them, but what we've generally done is created models and dies, printed them at the same time as you create your castable restoration or pressable restoration. All of them fit together perfectly, and away you go. Works out great. Let's see. What are my thoughts on intraoral digital scans for partial frameworks? Are they accurate enough? Last I looked, actually, folks were having a hard time cross arch. So unless you're doing a unilateral, you're probably going to have a little bit of a problem with the scan cross arch. I think that most of the companies are working on that right now. Because of the technology we're using, it's basically knitting photographs all together as you go around the arch, and hopefully you get those all in the same position. But there have been some issues there, so it's not quite there yet for the accuracy, I don't believe. Okay, those were the two questions that popped up right now. Now, once again, let me remind you that for those of you who needs CE credit, you will be emailed a little bit of a test, and I promise you it won't be hard. It's just to remind you of things, and return that to us, and we'll get your CE credits out to either the NBC for those of you who are CDTs, or Florida CE broker for those of you who need it there. Now, if you are another professional in our industry, and what you need is basically a certificate, just when you email your test back in, indicate on there that you need a certificate, and we're happy to send that to you, and you can return that to whatever granting authority you need to return it to. So thank you very much for spending time with us again today, and please come back and watch some more. Thanks. Bye.